Attention, please. Eastern Airlines Flight 19, now ready for departure.
Welcome aboard the Walt Disney World Express monorail. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we're entering the vacation kingdom of the world.
There's enough land here to hold all the ideas and plans we could possibly imagine. We call it Epcot. Will be our experimental prototype city of tomorrow.
Welcome to another episode of the Retro Disney World Podcast, taking you back to the vacation kingdom of the world, the way it was, and the way it is in your memories.
All right, welcome to episode 28 of the Retro Disney World Podcast. This episode is entitled Whoopin' and Hollerin', and we'll be taking you back to the days of River Country. I'm your host, Todd McCartney, and with me, as always, is Brian Miles.
Greetings from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania.
How you doing tonight, Brian?
I'm basking in the glow of the city of brotherly love.
That's right, yeah. Mr. Hal Bowers.
Aloha.
Aloha, Hal. You're back from Hawaii, actually.
That's right.
So that's a real aloha.
It's authentic.
Authentic aloha.
He's full of muesli.
and rum and pog.
That's right. And at the helm tonight, this is his episode he's been waiting for since the beginning of this podcast, is JT Cougar, who will be taking us through River Country. Welcome, JT, as always.
Hello, I'm in Ohio, not at Disney on spring break, but it's okay because we can talk about River Country.
That's right. We got a lot to talk about tonight. Well, last month we took you back to Spaceship Earth, and I will say that episode came out great, guys. Wouldn't you agree? I think we got a lot of great feedback, and the statistics on it and the number of downloads was huge. But we had a couple corrections and comments from last month that we wanted to go through. One was a mistake that I made. I had mentioned towards the end of the podcast that the music that you heard when you crested inside of Spaceship Earth was titled Space. That's incorrect. That was Space is actually from Horizons. The correct piece of music is really just an instrumental cut in a leader and an end piece to Tomorrow's Child. So that's the right thing there. The other thing is that we had somebody write in specifically about the Renaissance scene with Michelangelo. Tonga Extine wrote in and said, "Isn't Michelangelo left-handed?" And then, sure enough, if you look at it, the audio animatronic figure is right-handed. So, Hal, you did a bit of digging for this.
I did. I did this. There's this wonderful thing called Google, and I very quickly discovered that scholars who studied Michelangelo's drawings looked at the way he did his hatchwork in pencil and determined that he was most likely right-handed, but there was no evidence to support him being left-handed.
Interesting, even though he's listed on some other sites as being left-handed. So
yep.
The mystery remains.
Oh, there's something I ought to tell you.
Tell me. I'm not left-handed either.
The other thing, you and I have discussed I guess we call them triangle things between the cars.
That's a very fancy technical term.
It is a technical term. Spacer cars, maybe. We talked to a couple people who had worked the ride, and nobody really has good recollection of what's in those triangles or why they're even there. We think it could be to hold equipment, or it could be to help balance the ride with the number of people, because you are going up and down. You want it to be balanced all the way around. It could be a legal limit. You have to put spacers in there because you can't have a certain number of people inside the building at a certain, at any given time. And also as hold auxiliary power equipment, as we talked about. So we did get a lot of, again, people who had worked on the ride over the past number of years, and we're actually going to talk to them and start a mini series here on the Retro Disney World Podcast. We're going to have some mini episode entitled "How Did It Work," where we're going to talk to people who were, ran attractions in different areas of the park and get their take on it and set up some mini episodes. So I think the first one we'll do is how did Spaceship Earth work? Yeah, talk about the triangles and spacers.
I thought you were going to say we're going to do mini episodes on the triangles.
We'll sit there.
A bi-monthly series.
Yeah,
something's
right.
in there.
You won't believe it. When we get to Isosceles, it's just going to be amazing. So, But JT, this is your episode. But before we even get to the details of River Country, you've got to go out to the mailbag here. And what did we have come in this month?
Well, as always, good flood of mail coming in. The weather's nice, so it's easy to get out there and check the bag. First one I would like to share. This is from a tweet, I believe, from @HistoricalTourWDW. They said, was Mickey secured at the top of Spaceship Earth by a tether for the commercial of him waving? And that was the one, we'd all see on Sunday night movies, on the travel commercials, promoting where Mickey was standing up there waving. Is there a door? Was he placed by helicopter? What actually happened?
I can answer that.
Oh, okay.
At D23's Epcot 30 celebration, one of the segments was with former Imagineer Bob Garner, who was responsible for filming that particular advertisement with Mickey perched atop Spaceship Earth. And he told us the story that day about the time he almost killed Mickey Mouse. And what he told us was that there is a scissor lift there that takes you up to the hatch. There's a hatch that pops open on the roof right at that point. And this was a time in American industry where safety was not always job number one. And they had the idea of filming this ad. And the way that they filmed it was they put Mickey on the scissor lift. They had a rope tied around his waist, fed down through the pant leg. And Mickey is up there, standing atop the scissor lift and the open hatch, attached by a rope. There are two men holding onto his feet. There are gusts of wind, as you can imagine, because you're, how tall is that?
180 feet.
80 feet, yeah.
Yeah.
And he said they have this helicopter flying by this man with a rope around his waist and guys holding onto his feet. And they did the pass. I think he said something like 3 or 4 times. They brought the guy down, and he said the only way the ad ever got made, I know he told us the story. He got a phone call that afternoon from some executive. I would love to say it was Dick Nunes, but I don't know who it was. Who like, what the hell are you doing? And so they got the footage, and they started to run it. And I think his postscript on telling us the story was that particular clip was the longest running clip that they ever used over the years in a Disney commercial. They just kept reusing it for years.
And I do remember, I mean, from the in-resort television to commercials to the Disney Channel. I think, JT, where'd you see it? Was it the Sunday night movie?
Yeah, just, always commercials and, visit Disney World, that sort of stuff.
Yeah, and like a lot of other things, one of the reasons they stopped using it is that obviously it was shot in standard definition, and once the big maneuver and move to high definition came, they stopped using all of those older clips that they had. And also in 2000 they put a gigantic 2000 and a wand on top of the Spaceship Earth, so it couldn't really be used anymore, but they used it through most of the 90s.
Yep.
Now my question is, though, it looks like it's closed up. Like, did they close the door underneath him to stand? Because it doesn't look like there's a hole below him or anything when you watch this.
That I don't know the answer to. I can only recount what Bob's story was to us. And there is no CGI there or anything, though. So what you said, it does look closed up. So the hatch might have been like down and masked and
like a iPhone cord through the glove box type.
Exactly. That's a great modern day analogy for our youngsters out there.
Painting a picture for our listeners.
Yes. So there's your answer.
Excellent.
So that's a good one for sure. You solved a big mystery. Next one was Jonathan Chapman. He says many pictures from the 70s at the Magic Kingdom seem to have a very small number of children in them. Like there wasn't any kids there. Was that really the case? Was it not a kid's place to visit? What's the reason for that?
Well, I think as we kind of discussed in some of our earlier episodes about early Walt Disney World, a lot of the a lot of the money that they were expecting to come from was through convention business. So the hotels were booked up a lot because of conventions. At the time, there were also lots and lots of older people in the area. They expected the park to be enjoyed by a lot of retirees. But really, I think the big factor is this is pre-cheap air travel. So it was very expensive to take your family from very far away on an airplane. You drove up until the point where they built this in Orlando. When our family went on vacations, my dad did pack the kids in the car and took them down to Fort Lauderdale or Miami Beach if you're going to Florida. So it just hadn't been the big tourist destination yet. And I think that's really the reason why you don't see it in the early ones.
Yeah, just so people understand, until the airlines were deregulated in, I think it was 1981, the routes were awarded by the FAA. So, TWA would win the route between Philadelphia and Orlando, and there was no competition. That was the airline that flew between those two cities, and so they charged like $600 or $700 for a ticket. And Todd, you remember you told us you have your ticket stubs from
That's correct.
Your airfare in 1980, and
it was about $283 in 1980.
Which we worked out to something like $600 a person.
$700, yeah, and that's what we paid in 1980 for that, and that was from Newark to Orlando.
So there's two factors. One is the airfare. So it was a major investment for a family to travel, and the second is people just didn't take their kids out of school to go on vacation back then. So the place was loaded with kids Easter week, Christmas week, and summer vacation. But the rest of the time, it was catch as catch can with, the clientele they could draw otherwise.
Right. I'm going to add into another one that it's an observation from all the films that we've restored. Now, when we restore films, what you see on our website is really what we've cut out. That's the Disney stuff. And when we purchase these films, we get a lot of films that are complete vacations from Florida. And as Hal pointed out, driving. And we see trips all up and down St. Augustine and Marineland and, sometimes SeaWorld in the later years. But one interesting thing about this is that 1971 to 75 were not even 30 years from the end of World War II. I know for a fact with my grandparents, at that point in their lives, they had become empty nesters. So the baby boomers had moved out of the house. And a lot of these films that I'm seeing are a lot of people in their, early 60s, just about retirement, and they're taking trips. And Brian, you've looked at some of the films before sending them to me, and I think you probably concur. A lot of them are people in their early 60s taking these trips down there without children.
They had a unique experience in that their forefathers, their parents and grandparents were all dead by the time they hit 60 or 65 years old. They didn't retire and go on vacation. They worked until the day they died. So, it really was that post-war generation was the first that could enjoy a retirement, and that there were Social Security and life savings and getting into the socioeconomic politics. The 40s, 50s, and 60s was the greatest growth of wealth amongst normal people, saving money and building wealth through owning their homes, and which made retirement possible. It just wasn't something that people, millionaires retired before. Nobody else ever retired.
Right. So there definitely is a different dynamic and a different demographic that visited back then. So you're not seeing things. No, we have not wiped all children out via Photoshop of all films, and
that would be crazy
photos.
though if you could do that.
Yeah, just this kid shouldn't be here. Just scrub that one. So Jonathan, thanks for writing in. It really was the case. There weren't a lot of kids then. JT, what else we got?
Well, last one I got is from @FancyRobotCouch. That says, why did Mission to Mars go away? That's what Fancy Robot Couch wants to know. Why did Mission to Mars go away, and why did they change Journey into Imagination? And that's a two-part kind of loaded question there, I think. But anybody want to do Mission to Mars?
Well, I'll take a stab at it. I think Hal's itching to say something too, but I have to plug a film coming up too with this. So, because it didn't completely go away, right, guys? my take on it is that as you may or may not know, Mission to Mars previous to that title was Mission to the Moon, and when moon landing became routine, it wasn't something special anymore. They decided to change it to Mission Mars and up the ante a little bit. By the time Mission to Mars closed, what year was that, Hal?
Oh, like 94, 93,
yeah,
94.
I mean, they opened.
It was pretty late.
They opened the other one in 95, so
95,
it must have
right.
been 94.
So you had a number of much more advanced attractions. It looked hokey by the point. There was really nothing to it anymore. There was no mystique of flying. You basically, if you hadn't experienced it, you pretty much sat in a circular room and looked at monitors that quote-unquote simulated space flight. At that time, you had 3D films coming out. The 4D films were starting to come out. And I don't think it didn't have the pulling power that any other attractions really did. And I think they just knew it had run its course. Unique circular rooms. They tried to do what they could with the replacements, with Extraterrestrial and now Stitch's Great Escape. But it'll be interesting to see what they do forward. Hal, Brian, any other thoughts?
I would just, it was part of it was the Universal effect. Universal was building big scary rides, and there was a belief that we needed to create some frightening, or thrill aspect to the Magic Kingdom. And so they created the Extraterrestrial encounter, which then was changed because it was too scary for some people.
Right.
And I guess if we ever do a Mission to Mars episode, I can go into great detail. But one of the interesting things I discovered in some interviews with Marty Sklar is that it was never intended for Mission to Mars to actually be there. When they were putting in Flight to the Moon, they knew it was already dated. They were trying to pitch RCA on doing a sort of like a journey into the computer, which RCA didn't sponsor. And when they repitched, they ended up picking up Space Mountain instead. So they grudgingly updated it to Mission to Mars. It was kind of like a chain around their neck, I guess, for a while. And they had been looking to try to update Mission to Mars for quite some time. There was a really funny story that Bob Rogers told, who was the director of Impressions de France and did a lot of stuff in World of Motion. There was a charge code that people were put on in WDI, and when he was in between gigs, Marty Sklar put him on a job to try to come up with ideas to update Mission to Mars. And so he said he was thinking of all kinds of crazy things, like having tentacles come into the room. So he was on that for a while and wasn't making much headway. And then he got taken off and put on another job. And then he went to whoever was his boss at the time and said, "Oh, but this Mission to Mars thing, I don't have it done." And he's like, "Don't worry about it. That's just a code they set up when they need to give somebody a buffer before they have a real job. They just put that in there so they have something to charge against."
So the hint I gave, well, how maybe we should do a Mission to Mars episode soon, but we have the upper scanner footage, and you guys have seen it, right?
We have.
Pretty cool. We were able to sync it with the soundtrack, so that will be coming out. And
this is actual footage that they used for the illusion of the ride.
Exactly. This is original. The print date was 1989, and from my understanding and looking at the print, it doesn't look like it was ever used on the ride. It looks like it was a spare film that was never used. So it's a copy that would have been put on the ride, but it was in fantastic shape. It's a silent piece, but we added the actual soundtrack to it, so we'll be sharing that out in the coming months. And
and you'll be able to sit in a room, darken it a little bit, turn up the bass,
project it on the ceiling,
and experience what it would have been like to ride Mission to Mars, and then you decide for yourself why it went away.
Exactly. You let us know, because, well, without getting into a lot of detail, the interesting thing is that after I restored it, it's so clear, scanned in high def, that you realize how hokey some of the effects were, especially with the spaceships. But in the actual attraction, with it rear projected on a screen that was 30 feet above you, you never saw the detail. It looked, decent because it was grainy and didn't look perfect. But it's a totally different experience when you scan it in. So, but Fancy Robot Couch, thanks for writing in. And they had a second part, right? Why did they change Journey into Imagination? And I think maybe we should leave that question for the actual Journey into Imagination episode later this year.
Because they're stupid. That's why.
Yeah, exactly. There's might be more to it, but that's the short answer, and we'll get to it later this year. So, all right, JT, is it time to close up the mailbag, or do we have anything else?
Yeah, so close the mailbag, Todd. If you want to get your message potentially on the air, email us, podcast@RetroWDW.com, tweet us at RetroWDW, and we'll be looking for your messages. Thank you.
All right, well, before we get into this month's main topic, which, as we mentioned earlier, is River Country, we have the audio rewind to do. So let's take a listen to last month's audio rewind puzzler. All right, well, if you guessed Impressions de France opening theme, you are correct. That's the first couple bars of the music when the movie starts in the France Pavilion at Epcot. So congratulations to Stephanie Haddon. Congratulations. You'll be receiving this month's prize, which is a set of pins. And Brian, you've sweetened the pot, actually. You added something in as a surprise here. So she gets the pins and a souvenir photo set that looks like a postcard booklet from the 1964-65 New York World's Fair, featuring photos of the Disney attractions in additions to that was given out to attendees at Destination D in 2014. So that'll be coming to you along with the pins, Stephanie. Nice. Congratulations, Stephanie. This month, we'll be giving away a set of pins, and I'm going to throw in some old ephemera and brochures that I've got here. So we've got a nice little packet of different brochures, World of Motion things, all sorts of good stuff we're going to throw in.
The Bradenton, Florida Holiday Inn, if you got that brochure in there.
Well, you know what is in here, too? I've got it's right here, guys. The Walt Disney World Vacation Kingdom Photo Express. Same-day service. Color prints only.
Oh.
Yeah.
With Mickey in the photo window, that artwork?
No, look at this one. This is very bland.
Oh, wow.
Just like a parchment envelope. Yeah, we'll throw that in, too. Copyright 1983. That prize is available if you can guess this month's Audio Rewind Puzzler. All right, if you think you know the answer to this month's Audio Rewind Puzzler, send your guesses to podcast@RetroWDW.com. All entries should be received by April 30th, 2017. We will pick a random person from all correct entries to win this month's prize pot. And all entries, regardless if they're correct or not, will be entered into our summer prize pot drawing. So,
just to clarify, we do not select a random person. The computer selects random person.
So you heard
it's not just us sitting around.
Yeah, JT fires it. You heard it back in the what was it, the January or December episode. He went downstairs and fired up the computer. But he got that fired up and picked it out. So, but we have a prize pot. JT, you're keeping track of the prize pot. And what do we have so far in it? There's the list.
I got my paper.
There's the list, yeah.
January, Walt Disney at the World's Fair, 4 CD set. Last month we had the mystery prize. That's what I have written down. Did we clarify the new prize?
I'm willing to reveal what the mystery prize is right now.
Here we go.
All right,
Here we
and
go.
I'll write it down.
All right. The mystery prize is the official album of Disneyland and Walt Disney World 33 1/3 LP record from 1988.
So a record.
A record vinyl.
Vinyl record.
It's still in the wrapping, right?
Still in the wrapper, still sealed. NOS, new original stock.
New inbox, NIB.
That's right.
Shrink wrapped. Okay, so that's the February prize. Now this month's prize.
And how you're adding something in for this month as well, correct?
You're right. So we are adding to the mystery pot a little golden book from 1971 called A Surprise for Mickey Mouse.
And how? What is the significance of this to Walt Disney World?
The significance of this book to Walt Disney World is that it tells the story of how Mickey Mouse joins the Mickey Mouse Revue.
Look at that.
Yeah.
So it's got Conductor Mickey on the cover. It's a little golden book.
Yep.
If you're familiar with those, you can put it right in line with your collection.
He's hanging out with his friends, and then Morty and Ferdy say, Walt Disney World is going to have a Mickey Mouse Revue, and guess who's going to direct the orchestra? and they say, "You are Mickey," and then they put him on a plane.
And for those of you who don't know, the Mickey Mouse Revue is where present-day Mickey's PhilharMagic is, which was preceded by The Legend of the Lion King, which was preceded by...
America Sings.
Magic Journeys played there
Magic
for a while.
Journeys. Magic Journeys from Epcot.
It was moved over there for a period of time.
When Captain EO exiled it, it moved over to the Magic Kingdom.
So those are all for future episodes, but we have some great footage of the Mickey Mouse Revue coming up with sound, and it's got about 3 minutes running time, so it's a good portion of the attraction. So, again, if you know the answers to this month's podcast, send your entries to podcast@RetroWDW.com, and we'll get you entered into for the prize pot and this month's prize. All right, well, it's time for this month's main topic, which is River Country. JT will be taking us back there in just a moment. And guys, I dug out my Birnbaum 1986 guide, and I wanted to lead off this month there reading a little what he said. I thought some of the way that he positioned this is kind of interesting. Slipping and sliding down the curvy water chutes at top speed, getting tangled up, all arms and legs in the whirlpools of Raft Rider Ridge, then whamming into the water from the swimming pool's high slides makes even careworn grown-ups smile, grin, giggle, chortle, and roar with delight. People who climb to the top with trepidation embark on the lightning-fast journey to the bottom, only because it seems too late to back out. At the bottom, they rush back for more. Line haters queue up over and over again. Those who associate lakes with muck and weeds go into ecstasies over the way the soft sand on the river country bottom squiggles between their toes.
Jeez.
So, pretty heavily written that you're going to enjoy this place even though it's going to throw you around like crazy. So, JT, let's rewind the clocks back, talk a little bit about what started River Country and how did we get there?
All right. Well, the one thing I always think about River Country is, as I've said in previous episodes, Fort Wilderness, we stayed there, we, camped, did the whole deal, and it was always like a place that kind of like, you'd see it, but it beckons you, if for lack of a better term. Like a comparison is like if you're at the Contemporary and you can sit there and see Space Mountain. Like that was kind of like our Space Mountain was River Country, as weird as it seems. Like it was off to the left. Like if you're coming up past Pioneer Hall, the trading post, it's to the left. But if you're getting off the boats at Fort Wilderness, it was to the right. And even if you didn't go back towards it, you would see they had like a big looking metal drum water tanker thing on wheels. It looked like a big like covered wagon type thing, but it had the River Country logo, and it was kind of sitting there sort of to coax you that direction. Now, out of you guys, who's been there?
I have not.
Oh, I went a couple of times in the mid 80s. And I actually, one of my many brushes of attempting to work for Disney and not being able to was I decided I wanted to be a lifeguard at River Country as a summer job, because that seemed to be like the best cush job that you could have at Walt Disney World.
We'll talk about that.
Yeah, we're gonna hear from Chuck a little bit later, who worked there. You might be glad, Hal, that you didn't.
Yeah.
I went through lifeguard training, and I was actually like, you had to do a 100-yard swim or something, or 100-meter swim in like 30 seconds, and I did it in 31. So I washed out of my Red Cross class, and I wasn't able to. I had to go work flipping burgers that year. So I regretted it, but maybe I won't now.
I did not try to work there, but I never visited. My early trips to the parks or to the resort all fell between November and February. And as JT will let you know, the park often was closed during the winter months.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Well, just kind of, so we get the feel for it. I only went once in all the years of staying at Fort Wilderness. So, I mean, it wasn't like I'm the full-on experiential season pass holder, but I definitely visited that and remember it well.
So, yeah, JT, a couple days ago, you and I talked to Les Scalota. So Les worked elsewhere in Walt Disney World, and he got called over to assist with River Country. Les went on to, he's just recently retired. He's an Imagineer with Disney for a number of years. But we talked to him a little bit about some of the early inclinings that a water park was coming to Walt Disney World.
One of the things I remember, or a couple of things I remember about River Country, was one day we were told to get one of the playground slides and go down to the dock. Okay, and we're going, okay, so we wrestled up a slide from one of the playgrounds and went down to the dock, and Dick Nunes showed up. And so we're all there, and we're going to wonder what this is about. And Dick says, put the slide at the end of the dock, and our lifeguards were there, of course, and he goes, all right, you guys go ahead and, guys and girls, start sliding down the slide. And then they would talk, okay, after each slide, and they'd get together and huddle up, and then, we're all there going, what the heck's this about? And then he said, raise the slide up. Uh-oh. So I don't know how many times we did this, and I can't remember what we used to raise the slide up, but we kept elevating the slide at the end of the dock, and they kept doing this, and we're going, this is fun. I wonder what this is all about. So at the end, he said, thank you, jumped in the boat and took off. All right. We packed up our stuff and went back. And for the longest time, we had no idea what he was doing. All right. As time goes on, they said River Country's coming and this and that. And then we finally figured it out when we seen the slides in the swimming pool that were, so high up that was a mock-up and a test. Yeah, the drop would determine, the excitement of the slide plus, are we going to hurt anybody? But that was the original mock-up that he pulled off, so they could determine that elevation. Which slide to the pool?
Which dock was that? Like the one where the boats pull up, or the southern one?
Yeah, that was a Fort Wilderness dock. Okay,
just right there on the main launch.
Yeah, right at the end of it.
Lovely. Okay.
Imagine guests coming off some boats. What are those people doing 12 feet up?
Well, yeah, we were wondering ourselves, going, what the heck's this all about? And
right.
And you know how Imagineering is today. Well, that was WED at the time. Very secretive, nobody ever knew what they were doing. And of course, it took us for the longest time to go, I remember we did that slide mock-up down there at the dock. Now we knew what it was all about.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
But well, you never know what you're going to get into. That's the fun part about Disney. You never know what you're going to get into. It was quite exciting.
So, as Les said, that was kind of like the early test bed of, and I thought that was so hilarious. Like there, I'm like, so you're talking the side dock, where the lifeguards and that sort of stuff like parked and traveled. No, the main boat dock. It just blew my mind right there. I mean, it might have been early before ferry traffic started, but I thought that was awesome. So it led into the creation of River Country, which from, the naked eye, it looks like you're just kind of in a little cove outlet thing right off of Bay Lake, but it's actually a little bit more complicated than that. To keep it simple without getting too crazy technical, they had like a basic bladder system or a rubber type wall, the way I understand it, dividing Bay Lake and what they called Bay Cove, which is kind of like the open water swim area at River Country. And Bay Cove was actually taller than Bay Lake, so it kind of had this cascading water over the bladder type thing into Bay Lake. And the way that the water went into there and was, we'll say, mildly filtered. I'll let Todd, who's our resident pool expert, chime in on this. It was mildly filtered. So if you can picture the flow of water, it got pumped up this mountain, which we'll get into a little bit. And it was basically then the water that fed down the slides and took you down the slide, and then it went into the cove and then back out into Bay Lake.
Right.
And from what I understood, it was, like I said, mildly filtered, right?
I think it was basically, a particulate or keeping, shoes and boots and different things, leaves and debris out. But it was basically lake water. And the water was kept about 6 to 12 inches higher than Bay Lake. So this rubber bladder or coffer dam, whatever you want to call it, the water would eventually, as it was replenished into that area, would spill back out into Bay Lake. And that's how they kept not only the main swimming Bay Cove area, the main water slides, the whitewater raft ride, the 2 body slides, and also one of the kiddie slides that was up on the southernmost area of the park was all supplied with water. So it was revolutionary in that sense that you could, quote unquote, swim in a lake and have lake water, and really integrate it into the landscape, which was unique for its time too. You know, one of the very first water parks in general, but one of the first, I think, that was themed and integrated.
Yeah, it's Wet and Wild takes the claim as the first water park, and that was 1977. And this, in my opinion, I think this was the first fully themed water park, a legitimate, unique thing in 1976, which we talked to a few different people, and you can read online. They did have a soft opening in, May of 76, but the official opening date was June 20th, 1976. And, Todd mentioned the theming. It really rolled over from Fort Wilderness as far as the fencing, the light posts, the signage, even the trash cans. When you walked in, it felt like a seamless, it was almost like it could have been the resort pool of Fort Wilderness, but it actually wasn't, unfortunately. From there, though, we learned about they had a special guest of honor that for the grand opening, and it was actually Gerald Ford's daughter, Susan Ford, and she was the guest of honor. And I believe, didn't she go down a couple slides or something like that?
Yeah, JT, we spoke with Chuck Breitart, who was a lifeguard there and also was there for opening, and he told us a little about Susan Ford and how that went.
We had celebrities come in. The president at the time was Gerald Ford, and his daughter Susan, and a bunch of Secret Service guys were there for the 4th of July, and it just added to the chaos. That place was packed. It was like sardines.
Going off of Chuck and what he had to say, it was an interesting choice, I thought, for, they didn't have a president come to open a water park. They had the president's, younger kid come do the slide. How old was Susan Ford then? Do we know? And I assume teenage years.
Yeah, she had her senior prom in the White House, so she was 18, 19 years old. Yeah.
Okay, so, it wasn't like they're getting the first lady to christen the water slide, but, they had the daughter come. But we also talked to Les, and Les had a different take on what actually happened that day, which is quite comical.
Well, we got a call from the manager, came back. We all had a group up, and that the next morning they're going to have this huge walkthrough with the president's daughter and media. This is before it opened, a media event. That's basically what they tell you. And that we need to all wear ties. And I said, well, nobody in campground wears ties. I don't even have one, And, of course, my boss says, hey, well, I'll bring you one in. And I said, okay, great. So, next morning we all show up. We're all grouped down in River Country in the meeting room. And, they go, here's your tie. And they're all in ties, The team that was, we had different points throughout River Country that we had a man. And I get my tie on, and they start, signing us to our points. And I take off, and my point is at the highest part in the park, which is at the top of the two slides that go down into the lake part of River Country. And so I'm standing up there at the highest point of the whole park. And then, so I looking down over everything, and I start seeing the entourage come through, Secret Service, Susan Ford, all the cameras and media, and they're walking through. And they're coming through, and I see one of the guys at the first post up, and I'm going, his tie on. What happened? And they kept going around, and I kept noticing none of the post ups have their ties on. So I look all around the park, and everywhere throughout the whole park, there's not a single person with a tie on. No Secret Service, no media, no Susan Ford dressed, just normal clothes. And none of my people. And here I am standing at the highest point of the park with a tie on. And I'm going, payback's going to be something on this one.
Yeah, right.
We were known for practical jokes in the campground. In those days, in the 70s, that was the greatest thing. We always were pulling, pranks and stuff. And they got me big time. I mean, the whole staff was in on it from the, cam back to manager all the way through. And they pulled the biggest one I've seen in a long time. And I said, you all. So, of course, everything's over, and we go back and we regroup. And I'm going, y'all ain't going to be for a big one now.
That's awesome.
And they were laughing. Of course, they thought it was the funniest thing in the world, here I am with that on a tie clear at the highest point in the park. You know.
Yeah.
So we did have a lot of fun. Like I said, that was one of the greatest.
So poor Les left up there in the blazing sun with a blazer and a tie and everything.
I thought this was crazy too. You know, that opening day, opening prices, $475 for adults and $375 for kids. And they did push, which we've seen on online, those combination tickets of Discovery Island and River Country. You kind of bought them both together.
Right. Now, did that include your train ride to the entrance? If you parked down there,
I think that was separate. But Les also mentioned that that he worked on Discovery Island, and they built the aviary over there just before this. And some of the research too. And we can talk a little bit more to Les about this. Maybe we can dig a little further. But there was going to be a bigger tie-in initially over to Discovery Island that never came to be, which is interesting.
So going off of, I kind of mentioned the theming. When you look at the pictures and you see it, it screams to me Big Thunder Mountain, Tom Sawyer Island, that rock work, and it was done by the same guy that did that. I could butcher his name here, Fred Jorger. Do you guys know that guy?
He is the master rock builder.
I think his J is pronounced like a Y.
Right? Yeah,
Jorger. Fred Jorger. Okay.
Fred Jorger.
Fred Jorger. He did the rock work very similar. However, he does his rock work. He's like the rock expert. He's the guy that said you have to think like a rock to make the rocks right. And I thought this was crazy. He actually embedded stones from different streams in Georgia and the Carolinas to sort of give it a different look, a different authenticity at River Country. So. That kind of lent to the theming, and like I said, very back hole, swim hole type thing with the rocks and the sand and the built right off the lake. A very unique theme to the whole place. And going off of that main water, it was completely unheated. So that's why Brian kind of mentioned he didn't get to go, because they did close often when it got too cold out or something like that. They couldn't keep it open due to the water temperatures not being regulated. So.
I mean, I remember in the summertime, two things about River Country. It was extremely busy and the water was extremely cold.
Yeah. And that's, I was kind of going back to like, you hear like these different stories. People really liked it, and then some people would didn't go because of that reason. It was just you look like you're swimming in a lake. But I grew up, going up north to Canada and stuff. So to me, it was like right at home. But yeah, I do remember it being very cold, and I kind of led myself to the pool more often than not when I was there. We talked about we were kind of, chatting before we got going on the episode here. River Country was amazingly small, 6 acres only, and it had like roughly 4,700, 5,000 guest capacity, right in that range. So, when we kind of talk about the problems towards the end of it, that was kind of one of it. The size and it just didn't like Hal said, didn't have the room for people.
Yeah. JT, you're right. I mean, and size-wise, people, if you can imagine the hub in the Magic Kingdom, if you imagine drawing a circle from the edge of all the buildings and all the different lands and that main hub in front of Cinderella's castle, including the water, that's 6 acres. River Country could fit in that hub area. That's how small it is.
It's crazy. It's just, it seemed, bigger because it had lots of little nooks and crannies, but it filled up with people. A lot of the pictures you see, it looks body to body a lot of times. Definitely, depending on the weather, of course, it was for sure busy.
There was a healthy wait to do just about anything there. It's like you definitely queued up for that.
For sure. Like I was saying, we'd walk by it. You'd see it on our way to the Magic Kingdom. We'd see it when we go out to dinner at Fort Wilderness. But one of the other problems was getting there. You had, in the early days, the Fort Wilderness Railroad, which, if you're unfamiliar with that, we're going to do an episode on it. But it was a railroad steam locomotive that ran around Fort Wilderness, and you could catch it at the depot, the settlement depot, or the main hub there at the entrance of Fort Wilderness, and ride it to the settlement, and you'd get there. The other way was you'd have to drive to Fort Wilderness Park and then take the internal bus or tram system to it, and of course boat from contemporary Polynesia and those sort of things. But it wasn't like you could drive up and park and walk in. It just wasn't that easy. So how did you get there? Do you remember?
Yeah, so we drove from Orlando because I was living in Orlando, and we would park up in the main parking lot and then take, I think it was maybe the first time we went there was the train, but I know the second time we definitely took a tram
Yeah, the open tram.
Yeah, and they would drop you off over by the store, like the general store thing, and then you would walk over to the park entrance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it was such a cool location. I'm still, just remembering. You'd see it, like we'd hop on the boat to go to the Magic Kingdom, and you can still see it now because it's obviously still there in ruins. But I mean, you'd see it just right there, right off the main thing, and you were like, "Oh, I just want to go there and swim. It looks so fun." I wanted to go through, since we kind of touched base on the, what do they call it, the Bay Cove area, where the main, like, we'll call it river water, lake water, was, the different attractions, and we'll kind of hit on those. And you guys have all seen video, and you kind of will know what I'm talking about here. But some of these things were borderline dangerous and crazy at the same time. One of my favorites, which I don't know why as a kid, it was always like, and maybe this is just me, the concept of a zip line was always like, I want to make a zip line. I want to zip across something. I want to go across this lake and drop into it. And they had it there. And it was this thing, you climbed up onto a platform, and it wasn't necessarily that the zip line was like dangerous, other than you could obviously rip your finger off in it or something. But you stand on this platform, which I felt like you'd hold like the T-bar, for lack of a better term, like at chest level, and you would sort of like jump off of the platform. Mm-hmm. So you had this big jolt before you actually went forward down the cable. And if it would have been above your head, it would have been so much smoother. But I thought that's amazing. You watch all the footage, it's these kids are like, pow, and then they go flying down the zip line. It's not a smooth ride at all.
So one of the comments on one of the articles I read, somebody said they loved that because they would zip down and they could time when they got that thud. It was like this extra power boost, and they learned how to do a complete somersault and then enter into a dive into the water. I mean, it's like,
of course,
if you dive at any water park now, somebody's gonna, the lawyers are gonna come out screaming at you.
Well, thank you, JT, because you explained it, because I remember I tried that thing several times, and you would basically walk up a ladder, and you would stand on the ladder, and the rungs weren't flat, they were circular. So I'm flat-footed, so it would sit there and it would kill the bottom of my feet as I was trying to go up. And I would hit that point, and I would fall off every time. I never went down that thing successfully.
It'd be like such a letdown. You got permanent arches in your feet.
Yeah, you'd wait for like 20 minutes, and then my ride was over in like a second and a half.
The zip line was always a disappointment at water parks. I feel like I was never tall enough or something. Yeah, I know the feeling. One of the next items on the dangerous, middle of the murky type water, the tire swing. Now, this seems so innocent, so fun, you just hop on, swing around, but I love the PR pictures they post this. The kids are swinging full speed. They're almost like horizontal to the water.
Yeah, they're like the 70-degree angle.
Yeah,
it's like a Sunkist commercial.
Yeah. I'm guessing the chains weren't coated in rubber or anything. They were just...
I saw that and I said, imagine if you flip the wrong way and your ankle gets caught in a chain and you come tumbling down. And going back to not only that and the zip line, you could land on somebody. You could do some serious injury just swinging off of a tire swing or whatever. And I'm sure the next one you're going to talk about is the what is it,
the world famous boom swing.
The boom swing, that's it.
It looks like kind of like this reminded me like Pirates of the Caribbean, like Jack Sparrow would do something like this, like it looked like a ship mast, like basically a big log hanging out there, like, I don't know, 8 feet long or something. And you climb up on a little platform with your wet hands, and you have to sort of just hang on to this beam and push off, and it sort of swings out over the water, and then you just either let go, and I've seen video of people just hanging on and it going back and forth, like, people are waiting in line, buddy, jump off the boom already. But
and they could come back and they could drop themselves right on the dock, and
so you just, you kind of got a little momentum, you swung out and then just let off. It really wasn't that exciting looking. It just looked like a complete hazard of a ride. But
so let's take a count here. We've got three not attractions, but 3 things to do and 3 safety violations so far, right?
It's definitely up there. And then the boom swing, you just take a rope, which was just, I'm sure, some twine or like a rope there, and you just pulled it back in, and the next person took the gamble on it. So after that, we have farther out, actually. This was closer to Bay Lake. It was called the rope climb, which I don't remember doing this. It was just basically a rope. you'd go hand over hand on, just, try to get across it. And it just kind of had like a big sag in it, and you just sort of like climbed across it. It just, nothing real fancy about it. But so those were kind of like the little, we'll call them mini attractions out in the middle of the lake there, the Bay Cove area. Definitely, I don't want to say unsupervised, because there was lifeguards floating around, but when you watch the footage, and I think we have some on the site even, you see that it's kind of a free-for-all for a certain extent on there. So there was a couple main attractions, though, the ones that really drew the people in, and these also used the Bay Cove, the main lake water. I'll talk about the first one, which it's kind of has two different names, and each part kind of had a different name. The Raft Rider Ridge, or the Whitewater Rapids. You want to think lazy river because you think of the inner tubes, but it really wasn't. It was kind of like basically a whitewater raft ride on an inner tube, and there were, once again, not a lot of supervision. When you look at the footage, and I remember doing this, you'd kind of get your tube, you'd wait in line for people to get off of it, they'd pass you the tube, and then you'd carry your tube across the barrel bridge up to the top of it, and you'd sort of ride down. And there was caves, there was tunnels, there was waterfalls, there was like whirlpool type things that you could get stuck in, but it really was like people just crammed in there, just sort of running into each other, and
it wasn't very long too, right? It was pretty short, and if you had to go bring your tube, for anybody who's been to Typhoon Lagoon, you got to carry your tube up the steps and stuff. Crossing a barrel bridge with tube, and probably a kid in tow carrying their tube. This is not not conducive to moving the population through the attraction.
This was my favorite. My favorite thing there was this, though.
You like this one?
I remember. I remember it being fun. Like, it was just like a kind of a free for all. Like, there was like a lifeguard randomly floating around to sort of move it along or keep you going. But
they would stand up on the edges and be able to look down and yell at people to like. The one spot where you could kind of. You'd kind of come down, and then there was like most of the whitewater stuff. You could actually get your feet down and stand up in there if you wanted to, and that's where the water would kind of circulate and knock people over. That was the funnest place to hang out. And then as soon as you went past that, then you went down that really shallow slide down.
Yeah, just a smooth like. Right
so if you weren't back in the tube, you'd like scrape up your legs and your butt going down that thing.
I think it's Chuck mentioned too. We were talking to him how you could be in your raft and get caught in the whirlpool, and then you just sit there spinning in a circle, going absolutely nowhere. It's interesting too. There's a photo I found where you remember the old rafts in the 70s and 80s, those long inflatable rafts that had maybe 5 or 6 of these long chambers filled with air,
and then
with the pillow at the end, right? There's a picture of a kid going down the rapids ride with one of those. So there was no supervision or hey, you must use this type of.
Hey, you paid your $4.50. It's like them restaurants where you can bring them whatever you want to deep fry. Whatever you bring, we'll let you slide down with.
As long as you pay your entrance fee, we're totally cool with it.
No, it was an interesting memory. I think when I went, it was the yellow and blue handle tubes, but back, you look at the old promo images, they had those black tubes that had
those were true inner tubes. Those were real truck inner tubes. And those things are tough, and they usually had some sort of giant fill valve somewhere on it. Probably scrape the crap out of your body, trying to get on them.
Don't touch that.
Yeah. We'll include in the show notes the 2 films that we have, because we have the professional film that was done, the promotional film. We also have some amateur footage of River Country, which footage of this park is rare too. There's not a lot of it.
Yeah, it kind of connected to that whole, like, you took your camera out in the day, like you guys said, to the park. You're not going to go risk it at the water park.
No,
those tubes, if they flipped over, they were so heavy. I swear to God, they'd knock you out if they hit your head the right way.
So
all right, so far that's another one. That's 4 things to do, and 4 potential
the insurance
injuries.
man has already walked away.
Yeah, we're just checking. And that was now again, the rock work was there. That was all sculpted concrete slide, I believe, too. That there wasn't any off the shelf product.
No.
I can just envision coming down and careening into one person and knocking your head on the rock. And
yeah, in fact, underneath, like I was talking about where you could walk, it's like that was all sculpted down there too, probably to make the whitewater effect. So there were places where that would go up and down, like large bumps and ridges underneath the water.
Oh, wow.
So you could crack your skull on that too.
It was a definite, like complete cement like ride, like basically a big wide slide made of cement. So that was one of those rides though that the water pumped up and it came down there, and that's what naturally filled the Bay Cove, just that motion of the water there. But the other two that did that was the Whoop and Holler Hollow. That was kind of the main attraction of the place because they were actual like water slides that they themed real well. They had the wooden trestles and the rocks around them that kind of made it look like it was like the whole thing was made of wood, like almost like you're in like a water wheel type system, something like that. But,
right, yeah.
There was two slides. One was 260 feet. The other was 160 feet.
That's not long. When you think about it, that's really not that long.
No, and they had such a unique look to them when you wrote. To me, the water, like when you see a modern water slide, the water just seems to be going down like if you let them run for like 20 years, there'd be a perfect wear mark in them, like, where the water went down. But these had this like sloshy look to them, like there was like a lot of, I don't want to say inconsistency, but just like it was almost like they made a water slide when they didn't really know how to make a water slide like they do now. And it just sort of like, you'd go down and you watch the footage, and I kind of remember this, but not really, like, not great breakneck speeds. I mean, you went down, it's not like you got stuck.
Here's a tip from Birnbaum here. The rule of thumb is to sit up to slow down and lie back to speed up. Be warned that once you lie down to accelerate, getting up is virtually impossible.
What?
Reclining with arms at side guarantees a slower ride than lying on your back with hands above the head. Arching your back so that only shoulders and heels are on the flume surface increases the pace still further. Combining position allows for braking and accelerating at will. There you go.
Interesting.
Nice job, Steve.
Steve had it all.
And when you look at the pictures, like I said, those wooden trestles really sold it for me. It just looked like it was something right out of like for lack of a better term, the Tom Sawyer, Huck Finn era. I mean, it was really neat looking. But Chuck added a crazy fact. He said that the top edge, which from what I read online, these slides were made of like a fiberglass, and they were a custom job. It's not like there was any off-the-shelf slide makers really that came out and built them. He said the top edge that kind of rolled over and was meant to look like wooden or whatever, rustic on the top edge, really ripped the mess out of people's hands. So they had some pretty nasty cuts there along the top edge. And you look, I mean, if you look at some of the pictures, you see that edge that he's talking about. You're like, wow, I guess you're not supposed to touch that. I mean, if you're going down the slide, I mean, I don't know about you, but when I think about going down a water slide, my first thought isn't to like touch the top edge of the slide as I'm going down, but that one you definitely don't want to touch if you ever...
And the sides were not very tall.
No, people were putting their hands on that to kind of help propel them forward.
So, Chuck mentions the hand thing, which we want to listen to him, hear him say that, but he also mentions some different things about as far as like the modern technology they used to send the sliders down, and also what happened when you exited that slide. So it's really interesting to hear him say this.
That water, when you came down the flumes, when you came down the big water slides on the mountain, that water was pretty deep at the bottom. And, of course, we had a guard stationed at the bottom of both of those two big slides, and then at the end of the inner tube raft ride that had a guard down at the bottom of that. A lot of people would come and be fairly competent swimmers, but not really strong swimmers, and they would be going so fast when they hit that water, and it was clearly over their head. I mean, and when they'd hit that water and not hit bottom, they would freak out. We used to pull people out right and left. I mean, many of them might not have made it if there not been somebody there to help them, but I'd say on an average day, we were probably pulling 10, 12 people out at least on a good busy day. We had people going in frequently. If a person got in trouble, hopefully you could throw them a flotation device that they could, and then you could pull them in with a rope, or you had the shepherd's crook that you could reach out and get them with. But an awful lot of times you had to go into the water to get them because they were panic stricken and wouldn't respond to whatever else you tried. The deepest part of the water was right there where those slides emptied in, and we discouraged people. We tried to keep people out of that area because if you had somebody in that area and the next person down could slam into them, it would hit you pretty hard. It would it would nail you pretty good if you didn't get out of the way pretty quickly.
Yeah, I was just saying, at Typhoon Lagoon and Blizzard Beach, those types of slides have electric eyes now that sense when the person reaches the bottom, and they give a stop-go light up at the top. Was there any such placement of that?
No,
I mean, I'm looking at a picture and I see multiple people on the slides, so I can only imagine.
Yeah. No, we had a system where they had once a guest reached a certain point on the slide going down, we had 2 lifeguards at the top of the slides as well, one on each of the slides, and they would get the people up. The guest would come in, sit down in the water pool at the top, and when the previous slider reached a certain point in the flume, we'd send the next one down. And so you would probably have 3, possibly as many as 4 people on the slide at the same time, and they were still coming. I mean, and so if you had somebody get in trouble, now the current, there was something like 200 gallons a minute of water going down these slides. So it did create a current that tended to push you away from the bottom of the slide. So, your chances of actually getting, hit by the next guy down were not too dangerous. But there was no electric eye, no timing system. It was just when you saw somebody reach a certain point, you let the next person go.
Right. And it's interesting because, I've been on some of the rides at Typhoon Lagoon, and a specific bathing suit I was wearing one day, I almost stopped a third through the water, and I wasn't even thinking that they have the electric eyes. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going to get creamed.
Yeah.
But fortunately, that type of safety. But JT just sent me a picture, and yeah, sure enough, on one of the slides, this is an overhead shot. I can count 1, 2, 3, 4, and there could be a 5th person under the trestle. On one of the slides, it's insane. On the other one, they've got at least 1, 2, 3. Maybe 4. I mean, and some of them are, they're pretty close together. I can only imagine.
But we had to do it that way. We had to get them, because there were only the 2 slides. Everybody wanted to ride them, and you might have, 300 people in line, and the line just never got shorter,
Right.
And so you had to get them on there and get them down, But it's surprising that there weren't more injuries in a sense. Well, when I said injuries, they also had an issue early on. The flumes had a cap across each side at the top. It was made to look like it was wood. It was a plastic strip that covered the top edge of the flume, and people would get their hand up there, and it would leave some nasty cuts, nasty wounds of fingers and hands and such.
So
it's just amazing that over at Typhoon Lagoon now and Blizzard Beach, when you come off, there's a soft pad to land on. The water's only about 3.5 feet deep. You've got the trigger system. You can easily get out of the way. But, here, being dropped into 12 feet and having to swim out and not expect it to be so treacherous, it's a wonder.
So there's a couple, you see those old signs, the placards that had the rules and things, and a lot of them say strong swimmers only, and that rule should be for the entire river country complex based on what we've been hearing and being there. I mean, if you had any hesitations on being a good swimmer, you definitely didn't want to go anywhere other than the famous Kitty Cove.
Why don't we want to go to Kitty Cove? Should we let Chuck tell us?
We can let Chuck tell us.
And that had a small
It's on the
slide.
other side of the barrel bridge. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And that wasn't chlorinated at all either. That was still fed from the lake, correct?
Yes, it was. That was all part of the same lagoon there with the water coming in and going over the dam.
In some pictures of that, the water looks very dark and more stagnant than other areas.
Well, it didn't have enough water coming into it to get a good flow, and the lifeguards didn't really like getting in that area because the kids peed in there.
It's full of pee and. Yeah.
So it doesn't. So you're not moving the water. It's got a natural additive.
Right. It was kind of the cesspool,
Right. that certainly explains why it looks so dark, and there was only really one slide back there for the water to be added.
But it was quite shallow. I mean, it was intended for young children, 5-year-olds and less, more or less. And so really any older kids or adventurous kids, they didn't want to be there anyway. They're just one or two small slides was all they had, but it was just a safer place for younger kids.
So Kitty Cove was, as Chuck said, it was in the main water. It was connected to the Bay Cove, but it didn't have that water flow from slides. It did have 4 small slides there, but they were just kind of like a generic water slide right off of that. It was like a big rock formation there. It wasn't any Bay Lake fed slides there. It was roughly knee-deep water. It was meant for... Some of the brochures and literature says pre-teens and youngsters, toddlers, I guess, but it's was a way to get into the old swimming hole, but for the little kids. And if you have even smaller kids, this place isn't really well advertised, and you don't see it much. But it was called Indian Springs, and if you were smaller at River Country and you remember this, it was basically an early splash pad. It didn't look very padded, as in like. Picture a slab of cement with 6 jets shooting at you on it. That was the splash pad.
Kind of like hanging out in a mall fountain, pretty much.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. It had that 70s mall sprinkler fountain look to it, and it just kind of shot there. It actually reminded me, for some reason, the pictures I saw, very similar to the mozzarella sticks at the golf resort for some reason.
Right.
That same... just what are they thinking type look. But
wasn't there a supposed kind of like what's over at Wilderness Lodge, where the spring bubbles up and continues? Wasn't there something like that there too?
In the middle, there was like a little
puddle running out or something. Yeah,
there's a couple pictures you see, and it's in one of the videos I saw on YouTube as well of the Indian Springs. And we mentioned the barrel bridge that you had to walk over to get to the big slides, and there was 2 bridges basically. And I love these old shots of the beach, because I mean it was a really nice beach, and it was really close to Bay Lake. So picture you could be on a beach with an umbrella. They had lounge chairs there, like 3 to 4 feet from Bay Lake, and you're sitting there in river country like that close, and the boats are going by. It's real hustle bustle at the time period. There was another bridge on that side called the Bay Bridge, and that one, it just kind of walked almost like right next to the bladder system, and it took you over to the slide side of things. Another interesting thing that I don't remember doing this, how you might, was the Cypress Point Nature Trail. And
I can't say we ever did that.
I mean, yeah, you're going to a water park, and Nature Trail doesn't seem like it was top of my list as a kid, but you went in there, and it's the one that if you ever drive by in a boat when you were going to Magic Kingdom, it looked like a boardwalk type system right out over the water, which it kind of was. It was really neat. There was those big trees coming out of the water, which are, what are those, how you Florida people know?
Oh, cypress trees?
Cypress trees. Okay, there you go. That's why it was called the Cypress Point Nature Trail. And you'd kind of weave through those, and there was like little beaches, like white sand areas where ducks would sort of nest and do whatever they do. And it was really cool, though. And that, I don't know, I thought when you look at the old pictures of that, I was like, oh, that'd be kind of cool to walk around now.
So I'm willing to bet you that the shoe tree is one of the cypress trees from Cypress Point.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah, it was close. I don't know if it jutted out that far, the boardwalk, but it was close. You're right. It was right there. But yeah, that recently, like not like maybe within the past 10 years, they demoed that boardwalk there, because I remember seeing it, after River Country closed, within 10 years or so. There was also your standard water park stuff. There was a regular playground. There were some cookout pavilions. 2 refreshment locations, and I kind of just wanted to throw these in there because, I mean, it might spark somebody's memory of going there, was the Pop's Place and the Watering Hole. Different things. I was wondering, and I just kind of curious about this, because it is you're at the beach, you're swimming for the day, and it's just to throw fuel onto the fire. Did they serve beer or alcohol at any of these places? How? Do you remember?
Well, I have it right here in Birnbaum.
What do you got?
It says picnicking is permitted. You can eat on the beach or seek out a table on the shady lawns. Sorry, folks, no alcoholic beverages are allowed to be taken into River Country.
Got it. I was really curious if, like, can you get a drink at Typhoon Lagoon?
Oh yeah.
That's what I thought. Yeah, it's like, so I was wondering, like, you get all drunk and
they'll
take
even
on the
bring it to your cabana
swing.
if you pay for it.
Because the slides are regulated and a lot safer in those other parks, they don't mind if you get tuned up.
So if Bay Cove wasn't your thing, which I'm guessing it wasn't for some people, or it was a little chilly, you wanted to go to a better heated area, they had a chlorinated pool they called the Upstream Plunge. And it was a kidney-shaped pool. From what we've been hearing, there was a pretty deep side, roughly 12 feet or so.
Yeah.
And then a not as deep side, but this housed one of the more famous shots in river country. They called this the Slippery Slide Falls. And what they did was they had a big hunk of, we'll call it the Disney rock, what you want to say, that was formed there, and you'd go up the side of that, up a walkway, up steps, and these were fed by, chlorinated water down in the pool, and you would basically sit on top of this rock, and it looked like they plunked a water slide that was only like 3 inches tall right into the side of the rock, and you
couldn't see the bottom of the slide when you were on it, so it was almost, it looks like a vertical drop, and then
it was a drop
free
off,
fall.
Yeah, and then you would drop about 7 feet into the water. We have another Birnbaum reference here if you'd like. It would slap your stomach up against the roof of your mouth.
I loved this thing. I don't know. I remember riding it like 5, 6, 7 times, like just over and over. It was so cool, like just because it was like really fast and you had that free fall feeling.
I think I was terrified of the concept of it. It just looked frightening if you stood by it and watched it.
Oh yeah, for sure. And that's it's one of those things that it was in all the leaflets and brochures and everything. The picture of somebody sliding down that or dropping off the Slippery Slide Falls. So that was really the only chlorinated area of the entire park. There was no hot tub, no jacuzzi area, nothing like that. Just the Upstream Plunge. And we had some info about the filtration system and some issues with it from Chuck, who actually was brought into river country for this region. He was a pool expert.
He had the experience over at the Polynesian running their filtration system for the pool over there, and when they looked for somebody, he went over to river country to help out, and here's what he had to say.
As far as the swimming pool, it was a huge swimming pool, they had made an engineering mistake in the filtration design, and it made it really difficult to backwash the filters and get them back online in a reasonable amount of time. So we ended up having to do filter backwashes on the pool at nighttime after we closed. I would stay there late, and it would take about 3 hours or so to get a backwash done on the filters. It was really tedious.
How often was that done? Every day?
It was if everything was working, well, it was about a once a week operation. That was about once a week.
Okay.
And the problem was it was a system that used diatomaceous earth, and they had not designed a good way to get that out of the filtration system. The spent diatomaceous earth, there was not a good way to get rid of it before you put in fresh, and it had to be shoveled out, scooped out, and it was a lot of hard work. It was a tedious job.
So the obvious thing we've talked about here is safety, and you get into that point where people start saying, why did River Country close? What happened? What's going on with it? And from what you read, it's we're joking and talking about the safety. I personally, and from what you read, I don't know if safety was the number one reason it closed. Now, it might have closed based on rules and things that were coming, but kind of get into this. But November 2nd, 2001 is, if you look online at some different places, that's when it actually closed, but D23 says September 1st, 2001. So let's just say late 2001 is when the last guest went into the park. And, a lot of people give different reasons. There's the whole amoeba thing, the brain-eating amoeba, and people died from swimming at river country. There was also the thing of, there was talk of a Florida law saying you couldn't swim in water at a resort type place that wasn't chlorinated, and you couldn't see your feet if you were in knee deep water, and they say that's why they closed the beaches too at the different resorts. So The other reason that I've read is the whole 9/11 travel issue, because it was right around then, and they just kind of might have temporarily closed it based on what was going on.
Yeah, you also had the stoppage at, remember, what is now Pop Century. That was the continuation in art animation.
The legendary years wing.
Yeah,
So,
that completely stopped. So I mean, I think it's a culmination of a lot of different things all coming together.
And I mean, when it did close in 2001, they didn't announce anything of it closing forever. They didn't say we're done. They just said River Country will open next year. Or then they said, well, we might open it as needed. And Disney did start to get into the 2 water parks that are there now. They had Typhoon Lagoon, they had Blizzard Beach, which when we discussed the size, I mean, they were quadruple this. They're huge in comparison to River Country, and people just weren't really going as much from what the accounts are of the thing. But it's a lot of different things, but really it was official January 20th 2005, so over 4 years after the last guest was there, they finally announced it was going to close forever or never reopen. And I don't know if you guys remember hearing this, or it was kind of, I don't know, not news. I guess it was kind of like, everybody sort of knew that.
Oh yeah, they'd been sitting for 4 years at that point. I mean, we know what happens in just a small period of time. You can, things become unusable in just a matter of months, and 4 years of non-upkeep, it's the cost to bring it back to any type of operating condition would be certainly cost prohibitive.
Yeah, I feel like in some ways it's actually a miracle it managed to stay open as long as it did. I mean, Typhoon Lagoon and Blizzard Beach, I mean, those are just so big and offer so many different attractions, and probably have a much larger capacity.
And I think, again, we're getting to that point where, as we talked a few episodes ago about where something goes from being dated to then becoming a classic. It's something that's dated that maybe we should retire or replace this, versus if it hangs around long enough, it becomes a quaint thing that people like to go on and still do. I mean, the issue with River Country in the end, first you talk about the changing tastes. Little kids, and don't be the people that, well, my little kids never minded swimming in the cold water. I understand but
majority rules.
Well, in general, when they're planning for their guests, the experience that they could provide at Typhoon Lagoon and Blizzard Beach with clear, chlorinated, heated water. And stuff that is up to current safety standards and current sanitary standards and everything. It just became, okay, well, how much money are we going to spend to bring this place up to snuff? And in the end, is it worth investing that money for a water park that is very difficult for a day guest to get to? There was no convenient way to get there. You were either taking a boat from one of the resorts on Bay Lake and Seven Seas Lagoon, or you were taking a bus to Fort Wilderness and then another bus to get to the back of the resort where River Country was. Right. There just was no, so when you're looking at all of that, we have a product here that has a shrinking base of people who are really interested compared to our other 2 water parks, which were major investments for them. And, the truth of it is, you get into October, November, December, January, February, March. I mean, it's just starting to get warm in Florida again, like the kind of warm where you're like, boy, I really want to jump in the pool. So they currently close one of the water parks at all times during the winter.
They do.
The one closes while the other goes under refurbishment, and then when that one opens, they close the other one for refurbishment in the winter. So it was excess capacity and location and age and the product. I mean, there was a lot of reasons why. And I mean, I today I wish I'd experienced it or could experience it.
And Brian, I think some people are going to say, well, you could have converted and chlorinated it. Well, think about that from a logistical standpoint. You already carved out the water table, as we know, in that area is ridiculously low. So to carve that whole cove out, seal it off, impossible. No, I shouldn't say impossible.
It would have been
very difficult.
Right, and at a time, post Euro Disney, and when they were scrimping on everything they could scrimp on and cheapening the product that they were putting out, looking for cost savings everywhere. It made no sense. I mean, if you're sitting there even before a board of directors saying, well, we got the Cadillac and the Rolls Royce over here from an operations
Yeah,
standpoint.
and
with
then we
Blizzard
got the
Beach
dirty
and Typhoon
river
Lagoon, and I've got an old Datsun back here that I want to put $10 million into. They say you're not doing that. That's crazy.
And there was no room to expand it either.
Right.
There was no place to go to make it bigger.
They always talk. I heard a story from a cast member. I don't know how true it is. They floated that idea of chlorinating and putting a wall up between the two, but it was the person told me it was going to cost as much as Blizzard Beach itself to do that. Right. So, because they closed and they when they were looking to do that, that's about when Blizzard Beach was opening in the mid '90s. So
right.
I thought it was interesting too. In the mid '90s, there was that time period, and where all 3 water parks were open at once. So when you got a water park brochure, it was all 3 were in there, and that's just crazy to me that there was a time when they all existed. This was such a crazy promotion. I don't know if you remember this, the All American Water Party. Did you guys ever hear this?
Yep.
In 1997, it was April to September. Every day was the 4th of July, and there's pictures out there of Goofy rolling into River Country in full on like Uncle Sam garb and like the big hat like Apollo Creed, the whole deal. So I thought it was pretty cool to see that.
It's
it was
Rocky
like a almost
3 reference, folks.
Yeah. No, Rocky 1.
Oh, what's the Rocky 4 is the one where he came out as Uncle Sam to fight the Russian, and then the Russian killed him.
Yeah, he came out against Rocky though too. That was the first. Sorry, we're digressing.
Sorry, we're off to Rocky.
Welcome to the Rocky Podcast.
Yeah, but so that was going on, and going into the Goofy thing, Goofy was always there, rolling down the slides in the full bodysuit, swim trunks, and Chip and Dale apparently would come over at times on horseback from Fort
Pluto
Wilderness.
going down with two ladies on the rapids. It's one of my favorite pictures.
And I found this, and I don't know once again how true this is. If you look back, and I was telling you guys this earlier, there's the ice gator at Blizzard Beach. There's the Typhoon Lagoon alligator. He's another one. There was this plan apparently to make a 3rd gator, a river gator. So there was a gator at every park as part of the
iconic character at each water
park.
I
was like, that would have been. I wonder if there's concept art floating around out there of the River Country gator, just shelved or something, but. It's to be seen if it was real or not. So, I mean, it's and as it's as we talked about the closing, it's still there. It's sitting there rotting away, and there's the people that explore that way and go into there. And what you can actually do if you really want to get close to River Country and actually even experience River Country, if you're at Fort Wilderness, you go down there. On your right, you'll see a hut. This isn't going backstage or anything. This is completely legal. There's a hut there, and that's the main ticket booth. After you cross that threshold of the hut there, which it's wide open, it's not breaking any rules, you can actually see the River Country bathroom. You can go walk up to the fence that's there, and that's where the backyard barbecue is and all that stuff. But that's about as close as you're going to get without breaking a rule or doing anything. And they even there was a big River Country barrel up on top there. It looked like it kind of dumped water and did different things. They took that over to Fort Wilderness, the Meadows pool, and that's now the showcase slide at Fort Wilderness. It kind of you go up to there and then you slide down a normal looking water slide around the River Country barrel. So the only other future plans or different things I've heard, just recently we heard the whole thing, the upstream plunge pool was filled in, and we kind of have randomly talked about that. That's because the Wilderness Lodge construction crews were over there and it was just close by, and the whole Zika rumor came out, but I mean they were just there, so I guess they assumed go fill it in. And then you hear the different rumors that could be a DVC, a future resort, but nobody really knows. It's kind of just still sitting there. And
I mean, they're going to develop the piece at some point, but right now they're building that addition to Wilderness Lodge and the lakeside villas there and everything. And so once all that's done, the natural thing will be eventually to develop the space in between there and Fort Wilderness, and that's where River Country is. So it's going to happen eventually because it's waterfront property that there's already utilities and everything running to. It's just a matter of time.
We
And
learned
JT,
something interesting.
You
Go
should have
ahead.
mentioned that the other way that you can see it is to go on the Lake and Lagoon tour. Because
I was
we rented
getting
the
there,
pontoon
yeah.
boats. Yeah,
That's right.
When we did our tour, we rolled past Fort Wilderness, Roy's cabin, then we rolled past the Shoe Tree, and on the left was River Country. Our boat got somewhat close. We started taking on water at some point there, but we rolled by there, and you can see the boom swing, you can see the zip line. It's all still hanging there.
You
just
can see your Cypress, whatever nature boardwalk there.
yeah.
That's gone.
You can get right up to Bay Bridge and that those Boleyn things that separate it. I mean, it's so weird to look out and it's like it's right there. I just want to go there. It's right there.
We always joked, my sister and I, we were like, they should just open it up for us campground people. That'd be great. Just make it the showcase pool for Fort Wilderness.
They could.
I mean,
they really could.
Brian, you've worked in construction, and as you said, people say, why have they demolished it yet? And the cost of demolition is extremely expensive.
It's the most expensive thing you can do in construction is demolish and then haul away. And the truth of it is, unless it's a hazard to someone, and since there's no one back there, you don't demolish something unless you have to, until it's time to. The same reason why half of Kitchen Cabaret is still sitting behind the bathrooms at Epcot in the land, because they didn't have to demolish the other half of it. It's to build Sword.
So, I mean, that's my whole recollection and what I experienced at the old swimming hole at River Country. It's definitely gone but not forgotten. He said you can see it tomorrow if you really wanted to roll by there on a water sprite or on your launch to the Magic Kingdom, but it's definitely not coming back anytime soon, that's for sure.
No, unfortunately, it's not.
Well, JT, for someone like myself who never visited, you've painted a delightful picture of a hoot and holler and good time.
Yeah, absolutely. And a special thanks to Les and Chuck for joining us. I know if you were listening and you heard some seagulls in the background while we were talking to Chuck, he was relaxing on the beach in Florida, and we talked to Les over the weekend, so we really appreciate both of their times. And we're going to have both of them probably back on the show. We've got some interesting tidbits and stories to share in the future from both of them. So again, thanks to Les and Chuck for joining. All right, as we do every month, we always add something new to our online store, which you can find at RetroWDW.com/support us. How, JT, we're actually ahead of the game this month. We've already posted our shirt, how you might be working on another one. I've already purchased 4 of these shirts for my upcoming trip in April.
It's so cool.
Cladding out the entire family and one extra just in case. So, why don't you tell what we have and what else you might be working on?
Well, as I said, the one thing I really wanted to do for my summer job was to be a lifeguard at River Country. So we made a River Country lifeguard T-shirt. It looks great as a shirt. You can get it as a tank, red
I
or
love
whatever.
the laptop case too. It looks like your first aid kit or something.
Oh, yeah.
You're sitting up on the chair. It's so
we
perfect.
got some of the long sleeves, which are great. You see the people on the lifeguards at night with the long sleeve red shirts as well, or even some in the sun wear them too.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think River Country is pretty popular. We should probably try to knock out a couple more for the fans. So.
JT, I know you've got some ideas. One with some rules and regulations might.
I would love the rules on a shirt, or even that, like I said to that one, it said "swim away from rocks" or something in that River Country handwritten font, on the wood.
Yeah, so we'll do a couple more. We'll definitely do some as the month goes on.
That's right. So as always, you can find all of our shirts, as I said earlier, at RetroWDW.com/support us. And you can find our pins at RetroWDW.com/pins. All proceeds from any of the sales go directly back into the show, helping us preserve films, restoring them, getting them transferred, and getting the show out to you on a monthly basis. So we thank you, as always, for your support. And guys, with films, we can kind of mention, we mentioned Mission to Mars earlier. We've got a fabulous 16 millimeter film of Epcot coming up, and I don't think we're going to see that one until about October, right, Brian? We're going to
Yeah, October's a big birthday for Epcot Center, and we've got special things planned whenever Disney gets around to announcing what they're doing for Epcot's 35th birthday.
Exactly. If they'd like to tell us, because we've got some ideas of hosting another event down there if possible. So if that works out, we'll see what we can put together. Why don't we figure out where we're going next month, Brian? You wanted to lead a little bit, right? It's been a while since you did
my
an
turn.
episode.
It's my turn. So we discussed a little bit before the show, and we're making our way around Future World pretty good while we're avoiding the two grand and miraculous options of Horizons and Imagination. But there's some bits of the Land Pavilion left that we haven't covered yet. So next month we will be we'll be boarding a boat and listening to the Land, the first iteration of the boat attraction in the Land Pavilion. And also taking a brief look at Symbiosis, the original film that ran before the Lion King environmental tale that runs now and has been running for many years. So,
just a couple weeks I'll be doing the behind the scenes tour. So maybe I can get some information, anything.
We'll just sneak into the dilapidated remains of Kitchen Cabaret for us.
Yeah,
and grab a few shots. And we will also not neglect next year or next month rather a visit to the farmers market, to the marketplace,
right,
where we'll talk about the Handwich and make our own chocolate chip cookies and lots of the other goodies that have been offered in the farmers market over the years. So,
and these are all the days before when there was only one elevator.
Yes.
So. Well, as always, thanks to everybody for listening. We appreciate your feedback. So you can send us any questions and comments at podcast@RetroWDW.com. And we will see you next month. And until then, Brian, take us out.
River country, big river country, come and join us for a visit to the old swimming hole.
Follow Todd McCartney and Retro Disney World on Twitter and Instagram @RetroWDW. On Facebook @Retro Disney World. For all things Retro Disney World, including exclusive merchandise, visit us on the web at RetroWDW.com. On Twitter, you can find our producer, Jason Bartell from Deepwater Studios @JasonDWS, our announcer, Andre Gardner @Andre Gardner, and follow our hosts, Hal Bowers @GoAwayGreen, for JT Kuzier @LS1JT. And you can find me on Twitter and Facebook @Brian P. Miles.